my final guest of the evening. Sorry to keep you on hold there, Pete. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, good. I've been enjoying myself. 10
too.
minutes was not enough for each person. I just keep wanting to chatting to everyone, but well,
it's amazing, isn't it? You could go on all night. I mean,
Yeah,
2 hours
well,
sounds like a long time when you start, but it's not been at all, has it?
I think I could have just asked Terry one question and then just walked off for 2 hours. That would have been probably easier. But anyway, Pete is the current chair of the British Guild of Beer Writers. He has won numerous awards for his books and articles and is editor of Full Juice magazine, and has recently released a fantastic book with CAMRA, Beer by Design, which is the first volume to look at the history of beer label design, drawing on your history in marketing, I believe.
Yes, I'm a turncoat.
I do marketing as well. We're all at it.
My presence in beer today is down to the fact that I used to make adverts for Stella Artois and Heineken.
So, Pete, we are coming to the end of the evening now, and as the chair of the guild, I thought you were a nice person to come, and you're eminently quotable. You pop up in the book time after time, and I think you were the second person I interviewed as well, but there's still loads of you in there because you are so beautifully quotable. So I want to know, what do you think we can draw from the history of CAMRA, and more importantly, where do we go from here?
I was going to say thank you for giving me the easy ones.
If you can sum that up in the remaining 3.5 minutes.
The whole. Yeah.
We're going to go over. Anyone who wants to leave, feel free to leave. You need the conversation to stay with your computer on.
I mean, I think I've been thinking about this all day since I saw that this is what you wanted me to talk about, and I think a useful place to start is that if I mean, especially the people here, incredible that we've got people here who've been around, involved in CAMRA for 50 years, who founded CAMRA 50 years ago. If 50 years ago you could have said what's the beer situation in Britain going to be like in 2021, no one would have got close. I'm certain of that. No one would have predicted that we'd be here with supposedly, well, somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 breweries, a greater range of beer styles and diversity of different beers you can have than ever before. And it's been absolutely incredible, and the problems never go away. You know, I think it's really interesting looking back on what everyone said. You know, Roger talked about what a great time it is to be a beer drinker. Tim talked about the plight of pubs, given that we've got so many fewer pubs, that people are drinking less beer less often, and so all these dynamics go on, and all these different things change, which makes it very hard to predict. But I think that last year I wrote this book about craft beer, and I looked at it from the perspective of forget what we all talk about when we talk about craft beer. Take a step back and think about what the word craft means, and the bigger thing of arts and crafts and things like that, and that made me come at this whole subject in a different way again. And when you go back to the 70s, when CAMRA started, it's really interesting because this interest in the growth of craft, CAMRA was absolutely part of it. CAMRA would not have happened without this broader interest in craft. And the very first written down definition of craft beer in the States, it talks about it's beer that's produced by an independent small scale brewery, blah, 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 blah. I call this kind of beer real beer. So craft beer very nearly got called real ale, and if we hadn't called real ale, it could have very easily been called craft beer. So it's, you look at this. So the early 70s was a time when we were sick of an increasing meaninglessness in our jobs, when big brands were surging and corporations were taking over the world, and work was being dehumanized. And we wanted to get back to something that we perceived as being more authentic, more real, more small scale, more human in scale. And exactly the same thing is happening now. We've got exactly the same set of circumstances now, and people are just going, I want something that I can touch. I want people I can speak to. I want something real. I want something authentic. And those trends are never going to go away. And so, you know, pubs are going to change, beer styles are going to change, people are going to carry on drinking less, all those kind of things. But all the underlying things that make people care so passionately about this are never going to disappear.
I was talking to Sarah Barton from Brewster's Brewery recently because I'm writing a piece about them for wonderful Pellicle magazine, and she actually said that she can't wait for lockdown to get to finish so that she can go back to brewing more cask ale, because that was 95% of their business was supplying pubs before lockdown. And she said that is the real craft, making good quality cask conditioned ale is where the craft lies. And she started her career at Courage, and she was pushing a button to start the brew and making sure the valve opened or didn't open at the right or wrong time, and she said that's why I got out and eventually started my own business, because I wanted the hands-on, the craft, the artisanship. And for her, cask is the craft. So yeah,
it totally is.
Solve it, are we?
There would be no American craft beer movement without CAMRA and without Real Ale. If you talk to the people who first started setting up breweries over there in the 70s and the 80s, this is why they did it. People came to England and Scotland, sorry, Colin, but people came to Britain and they tasted this beer and they went back home and said, why the hell haven't we got beer like that? Anchor, which is widely regarded as kind of the first ever modern American craft brewery, their flagship beer, Liberty Ale, they created after a visit to Timothy Taylor's and said, we want to brew a beer like that, but we've got these new American hops called XB081 or something like that eventually became Cascade hops. So Anchor Liberty Ale, which gave birth to American IPA, was them trying to brew Timothy Taylor Landlord with a new American hop, which is it's just wonderful when you see all these different connections that went on.
I spent quite a few pages of the book telling Charlie Papazian's story, the founder of the Great American Beer Festival and the father of American homebrew. And he's a fundamental figure. He's so pivotal in this huge craft brewing explosion in the States. And what he says about what he learned from CAMRA when he came over, he stayed with Michael Jackson, he was taken around London, then up to Leeds, I think, for the Great British Beer Festival, and absolutely blown away. And it really changed his whole perspective. And I think people can be too hard on CAMRA, and even internally, members can be too hard on CAMRA. Actually, it's a truly global influence that it has.
Well, when we talk about people being too hard on CAMRA, the lesson that I've learned over the last 20 years, since I kind of made my name by slagging off CAMRA when I started writing about beer, and there's some things that I would still agree with. There's some things that I was a bit ignorant about and just didn't know enough about, and I was wrong about. But the main thing that I've learned is that there's no such thing as one CAMRA. How can you have an organization of 200,000 people and it represents one single point of view? It just doesn't. If it's a really, really broad coalition of interests, there's some common things that unite people. But I try to refrain now from criticizing CAMRA as one monolithic thing, because it's not true. If someone in CAMRA's done something that pisses you off, that's just one part of CAMRA. It's not the whole thing, because there's not one point of view there.
Well, it's the same as people saying, oh, I like beer that tastes like beer. Well, lager's beer and stout's beer, exactly. But they don't taste the same. I think, Pete, I'm going to have to pull it to a close there, just because we're hitting our time limit.